how to turn this Adobe Illustrator lovely cityscape illustration into a moving image piece of digital animation. We're going to do this using Adobe After Effects, but before we open this file in Adobe After Effects, it's very important that you make sure that your work is presented like this and you have all of your separate items on separate layers. So if I want this car to move and this helicopter to move, I'm going to need to make sure they've got a separate layer. So ideally your document should look a bit like this. Ideally you've got all your layers locked so that you don't run the risk of accidentally clicking on something, and it's a very nice way to organize your illustrations, and it's a very professional way of working, but it also helps you when you open it in Adobe After Effects. So I'm going to save that illustration. I'm going to quit Illustrator, and I'm going to remember where I've saved that file because it's very important, because when I open Adobe After Effects, I'm going to go File, I'm going to go Import, and I'm going to click File. And I'm going to find the cityscape that I've saved. In this case, it's saved here, Cityscape. It's Conrad's cityscape, so it's called Cityscape Conrad. Before I just click Open and ignore all this really important options here, sometimes you'll see it and those options will be hidden, but I need to make sure that I choose it to import it as a composition and retain the layer sizes. I've also got to make sure this tick box is ticked to create the composition. So I'm going to just open that in Adobe After Effects, and it then brings this folder in and gives us a new composition. What you're looking at here is the timeline, and over here is the sort of project where all the different assets are that you can put into the timeline. Now you can see here I've got all my separate layers, so you can start to drag them in. If you want to, you can drag them in one by one, or you can drag them in all together, but do remember when you drag them in, they will all be on sort of a single layer all on top of each other. So you're going to need to do a little bit of moving around, and some of these layers will be in the wrong order. So if you just click in a neutral space, you can then start to move things up and down. So obviously my car needs to be on the top layer, the road should be on the top layer, should be there as well, and obviously the road needs to be down here at the bottom, and the car should be on the road. So you need to organize your layers so that they are in the right place. So the buildings will be here, you can see the windows are under the buildings. So, but again, if you've labeled your layers and if you've done it right in Adobe Illustrator, it would be very easy to organize, because if these were all called layer 1, 2, 3, 4, I wouldn't just be able to find the window layer and then move it above the building layer so that it comes out like that. So do yourselves a favor, organize your layers, lock them as you go, and label them. Once you've reorganized your layers, your document will probably look something like this. So here's one I made earlier, which I can open, and it should be on my project. Open recent, so there is usually a menu for opening recent things, which is very useful, so I'm not going to save this one. Once you've organized your layers, so it looks again like your cityscape, you'll be able to see this on a screen. So this is like the video screen here, okay, and all the layers are here. Now at the moment I've got a timeline that lasts for 5 seconds, but there's nothing moving. So to make something move, I'll start with my car. You need to start by looking at this drop down menu, and you get all of these transform options. You might find that your options look like this when it starts, but again there's all these little arrows here that take you into different options. Now before I do anything, I'm going to move the car, and you'll notice that the position numbers change. So my car is now off of the side of the canvas. I've just noticed my road's slightly off, and I'm just going to move that, so yeah, I've just moved my car to this position, which is off of the actual frame or outside of the video. If I then click this stopwatch, it toggles the ability of the property, in other words the car, to change over time. So it creates what's called a keyframe, and this little diamond shape here represents that keyframe. And again, if I hover over it, you can see that it's telling the computer that at the time code of 0000, it is at that position of minus 136.5 and 5010. That's the coordinates that object is on the X and the Y axis. So now I've clicked that little stopwatch. If I now move my object, it will move. But the thing I need to do before I do that is move the time. So if I now move my time, this playhead, which is this little blue thing here, if I move that to the end of my sequence time, so this is 5 seconds, and you have a little zoom in and out control here, so if I go to all the way, you can see this is basically represents 5 seconds of time. If I move this playhead from the beginning all the way to the end, and then move the object, what will happen is another keyframe will be created here that then tells the computer that at this point in time the car is at that position, and all of the bits in between will then be filled in with all these little sort of dots that you can see on this line. So if I now press space to press play, you can see the car just moves across the road like so. If I wanted it to move in an exact straight line, then you can do that, but you need to start moving it and hold the shift key, and it will stop it from being able to move up and down, so you can lock it into position. Although organically most cars don't drive in a straight line, so I might actually decide that it looks better if it's a bit less straight, and that the line's a bit more kind of organic. So again, just move your playhead to the end, move the object across the screen, and that's going on a little bit of a kind of a sort of the driver's sort of like, you know, not exactly in a straight line. So that's the car. The car now moves. I'm happy with that. Shrink that layer down, then go to your helicopter layer. Again, get the drop down menu. You'll see you've got transforms here. You've also got a mask layer there. Sometimes, you know, you can create other layers. If you don't want a mask there or anything else, then you can just press backspace delete. Sometimes if you click on something here, or you click on a tool up here, you may have created another option here. But if you only want to concern yourselves, they're called overlays, these things. So they kind of make the objects do something. So again, I need to first start by setting my helicopter off to the right hand side of the screen, because at this point in time at 000 it's off the screen. Then I click the position button, this little stopwatch, the toggle the property on and off, and it creates a keyframe at the 000 mark. If I then move it to where the car's coming in, I might want my helicopter here, so they kind of come in at the same time. Then move it on a little bit more, and as I move it again, you'll notice it's made another keyframe, and then I move it again, and I've made another keyframe. Again, I want my helicopter to kind of move like that, because helicopters very rarely move in a direct straight line. Again, I'm trying to create a little bit of realism in what I'm doing here. So, and you can see every time you move a property, every time you move the timeline and then move an object, it creates another property for it. So it creates another keyframe here that just tells the computer that at that point in time it's there, and everything in between will be the object traveling from that point to the point where you want it to do that. So if I now press the play button, because my helicopter goes off the screen before the car, you can see that the helicopter's moving faster than the car, which again in real life probably would be the case, as helicopters tend to go faster than cars. If I think that these keyframes here are a little bit too maybe jarring, because you can see they're very sharp angles, so that's quite a rocky path. If I don't like it, I can select all of these keyframes and just delete them. I could then do what I did with my car and just move to the end of this time, and then take my helicopter and move it in more of a straight line across the sky. If I want to create curves, I can actually use this pen tool here to put dots in between, and you can see where I created that dot. It's just created another keyframe there at that point in time, and another one, and then with that you can then click and hold and pull, and it will actually create little curves. So, you know, helicopters often sort of, maybe their movement is a bit more curved than kind of angular and straight. So actually, maybe this would look a bit more organic, and the helicopter kind of goes up and down there. I don't like the way the helicopter goes off the frame at this point. So actually what you can do is go back into it and just kind of move it so that it's not as much. You see, I can get my selection tool and just move it down a bit, and then it won't be going as far on that. I can move this a little bit again, and then, you know, you can sort of tweak the movements as you go, change them, and I've still got a bit there where the helicopter just goes off the page. So what I do want to try and do is bring this curve down, so I'm going to just take my helicopter, bring it down a little bit, and hopefully it's just going to kind of wobble a little bit like a helicopter probably would. There's a little bit of heavy wind there, and it's getting shaken up. So I'm happy with that as my animation. I'm going to leave it at that. And now I want to turn it into a video. So what I have to do is go to the File option, go to the Export button, and add it to the Adobe Media Encoder app. Media Encoder is another application and when you tell After Effects to export and add to Adobe Media Encoder queue, it will then add it to a queue. There's only one thing in this queue, and it's this background cityscape Adobe After Effects file. This button here will tell you where you need to save it, so I'm going to save it to my documents here, and click the save button. That doesn't mean that it's now turned into a video. You actually have to start the process. Make sure that the format is set to H.264 and make sure it's match source high bitrate. Also, before you send it to Media Encoder, in order that it retains its look and doesn't lose any quality, make sure that this button here on all of your layers is ticked, this little star icon, because what that is for the composition layers, when they get exported, they need to be converted from a vector layer, which is what this image layer is, and what Adobe Illustrator works with is vectors. You need to make sure that it is continuously rasterizing it when it's exporting it, because in order to make it into a film, you need to turn this vector illustration into an actual raster file. So the majority of videos, you know, when you hear things like 4K or 1080p, that is to do with the resolution. So 4K is 4000, so that would be 4000 pixels in terms of the video size. So, you know, in order to make this into a high quality video, the computer needs to be continuously doing that process, continuously rasterizing it. If not, you might find the quality dips. So if you've sent it to Media Encoder queue and you find that all of these things are not on, so these little stars on, then you might find that the quality of the video is less. So make sure you do that before it goes to Adobe Media Encoder. When you've got it in Media Encoder, you'll see it here. Make sure these settings are correct, and then click the little play icon there. It will then start doing the queue. It starts to then encode and render this animation. Now the animation that I've made here is a 5-second composition, so it's literally lasts for 5 seconds, but in terms of the process it takes to just render that 5-second animation, you can see it's just taking its time now, rendering. 5 seconds elapsed, and yeah, it then comes up with a little remaining time. So some obviously animations or videos take a lot longer to convert into an MP4 format, but it is the best format if you're going to go platforming it onto any of your applications like YouTube, so that you can embed it on your WordPress website or share it. This is really the best setting, and you can see it's been going for about a minute now. Again, that's 5 seconds worth of animation, so have a think about, you know, adding into your planning time. If you're doing a project that involves a lot of animation, don't forget to, when you plan, allow some time for this process, because it is quite a time consuming process, essentially just exporting. There's quite a useful thing here, which is a button that you can tick, which will automatically shut down your system. And we're done, and we know we're done because the status says done. So you can then close Media Encoder unless you've got anything else to code, and then you've got your documents folder where it's saved, and if I double click on it, we can see the end result is a nice little animation with a little car going across the road and a helicopter buzzing up and down. Thank you very much.